What is going on with Scream 5? It seems like it's been forever since we've gotten any updates, but this movie may actually be coming out a lot sooner than we think. And if we dig a little deeper, it's looking like this will definitely be not only a sequel, but the first chapter in a new trilogy. Hi! No, I really mean that. Hi. Zach Cherry here, guys. I started this channel because I'm a huge horror geek, and if you're like me, you might want to consider hitting that subscribe button and ringing the little bell thingy too, so you can make us YouTube official. Just for shits and gigs, give this video a thumbs up and meet me down in the comment section below to let me know what you'd like to see happen in the upcoming Scream movie. So a lot of people have been messaging me lately asking me what's going on with Scream 5, and the short answer to that is I don't know. I literally know as much as anybody else does at this point. But the long answer, which requires one to do a little bit of digging, which yours truly has done for you, there is actually a little bit that we can extrapolate from the information that we have been given. So from that, there are two different clues that we can look at here to see if we can get some more answers of what to expect from Scream 5. First, let's look at everything that we know so far. Essentially, everything that has been made public is that Spyglass Media Group has purchased the rights to the Scream franchise, and that they've been in talks with Neve Campbell, Courteney Cox, and David Arquette to reprise their roles, which was later contradicted when Campbell and Arquette both made suspiciously similar statements saying that they hadn't been called but are both eager to return. But since then, things have been very quiet. The Scream 5 announcement was made back in early November, so we're just a mere 3 months in. And if you compare this timeline to the same one we got when Scream 4 was first announced back in July of 2008, it would indicate that things are moving much more rapidly this time around. In fact, when Scream 4 was first announced, the only real news story we got for the first 7 months is that the Weinsteins were ready to make the movie, but they wouldn't go ahead without Neve Campbell's involvement, who at the time was hesitant to come back to the franchise. Compare that to now with Scream 5, knowing that Campbell is indeed willing to return to the role once more, and the fact that negotiation rumors have already been circulating within the first couple of months. This is a lot more promising than just getting a straight up no. In fact, it wasn't for an entire year after the announcement of Scream 4 that David Arquette and Courteney Cox officially signed on in July of 2009, with Campbell signing on another 2 months after that. But if you look at the Scream 4 production timeline in its entirety, it took nearly 3 years for the movie to go from conception to release. And a large part of why the movie was held up for so long is because, as well as the 3 stars, it was important for the Weinsteins to get Wes Craven and Kevin Williamson on board too. And when you take into account that there were 5 different people who only wanted to make that movie if the other 4 were also involved, and then factor in each one of their schedules, it became a giant clusterfuck. Now, obviously, when it comes to Scream 5, Wes Craven has sadly passed on, so a new director will need to be chosen, and there has been no indication that Kevin Williamson will be involved. However, it is interesting to point out that there was also no mention of Williamson being involved in writing Scream 4 until 7 months after its announcement, so that might not completely rule him out on being the writer of Scream 5. As with the Weinsteins on Scream 4, Spyglass is going to want to make sure that they can actually attain the actors to come back for Scream 5 before they commission any sort of preliminary draft to be written. Williamson is currently busy writing and producing his CBS All Access series Tell Me a Story, as well as producing and filming his upcoming movie The Georgetown Project. But a part of the reason why it took so long to announce Williamson as the writer for Scream 4 was because at the time he was busy with his shows The Vampire Diaries and The Secret Circle. Now, I'm not suggesting that Williamson is going to be announced as the writer of Scream 5, but it seems very likely right now that Spyglass has attained the trio of actors, which brings them to the next step of production, which is commissioning a script to be written, which would include all 3 of the legacy characters. And since we haven't gotten any news on any prospective writers, it could be a possible indication that they're waiting for Williamson to finish his current projects before making an official announcement. And as sad as it is that Wes Craven is no longer with us and won't be directing Scream 5, another part of the reason why Scream 4 took so long to produce was because the Weinsteins had to cut through a lot of red tape to convince Craven to come on board, as he was a little salty with them after how badly they butchered his werewolf movie Cursed. Now, the good news here is that Spyglass Media Group is not the Weinstein Company, and with a fresh director, there isn't going to be any messy behind-the-scenes turmoil to slow this movie down. So once a writer is announced, this project is probably going to move ahead quite rapidly, and we will get the official cast announcements, and a new director will be signed on, and and barring any complications, they should be able to move right into production. Now, I did talk about there being 2 different clues to help us understand what's going on here. The first one being looking back at the Scream 4 timeline, but the second one involves taking a look at Spyglass Media Group themselves. Now, there isn't really a whole lot of information currently available about them. We know that they were a dead production company that resurrected itself last year, but no new projects have actually been released yet under their label. They have no social media presence, no websites. They haven't made any official announcement about Scream 5. This news actually came from outside sources. The only thing they do have is a Wikipedia profile, which mostly has a record of their previous productions before shutting down operations, and then a LinkedIn account. Now, I don't have a LinkedIn account myself, so I don't have full access to their information, but from the employees that I can see listed, I wasn't able to garner much information from any of their IMDb profiles, and the only social media account I could find for one of them appears to be a personal Instagram, so I don't feel very comfortable messaging this person in regards to news on Scream 5. But I do imagine that they have the wherewithal within the studio, as they previously worked for the Weinstein Company for 12 years. But I figure any attempt at communicating with this person will probably result in a refusal of any information and probably get me blocked. And I know what you're thinking, this is all very Joe Goldberg of me, but if you want that Scream 5 news, you gotta think outside the box. You can't just keep refreshing your browser every 20 minutes. As far as Spyglass's upcoming projects, the only ones that we know about are Scream 5, a remake of Hellraiser, and a TV miniseries based on Stephen King's latest novel, The Institute. So notice that there's a general theme of horror there. In regards to the Hellraiser remake, this project was actually announced way back in May of 2019, where they had attained David Arquette to pen the script. And he's actually a really big deal. He wrote the Dark Knight trilogy, the Blade trilogy, Batman v Superman, and most recently Terminator Dark Fate. But since this was announced, there hasn't been any further information about it. And the reason why I believe that is because Spyglass is rebranding itself as a horror movie studio, and it's going to establish itself first with Scream before it moves on to Hellraiser, which is why we haven't heard anything new about that project since it was announced. It seems as though Blumhouse has the current monopoly on the horror market, and since Spyglass has acquired all of the Weinstein's previous film library, which includes all the titles released under its Dimension label, this is a huge opportunity for them to swoop in and take control. And if you recall, Dimension Films was kind of the last big horror movie studio before Blumhouse came around, and the Scream franchise was their baby. So I'm predicting that they're working on unveiling their brand right now, and once they've gotten all their ducks in a row, Scream 5 will officially be announced by them as the studio's flagship franchise. And I think if they're moving Scream to the forefront, I think it's very likely that they'll want to produce a trilogy to combat Blumhouse's Halloween trilogy. So we very well could be looking at a Scream 5, 6, and 7. And based on the information we've gotten so far, I think that Neve Campbell, Courteney Cox, and David Arquette have 100% been approached about this, and will at least be returning for the 5th movie, which will be a sequel and not a remake, as a lot of people have speculated. Anyway, those are my predictions based on my own research. There's nothing 100% concrete about them, but you do have to admit there is a lot of weight behind this theory. If you're interested in catching up on any Scream 5 news or Scream related content, you can click up here on this box. Guys, thank you so much for watching. I've been Zach Cherry, and I'll be right back.